The sky over Riviera Azor blazed in brilliant orange as the sun dipped slowly below the horizon. Gentle waves lapped against the smooth shoreline, their rhythm carrying the soft, eternal melody of the ocean. The air was rich with salt and warmth, the tropical breeze wrapping everything in a fragile sense of tranquility. But tranquility was the last thing Miles Sterling felt to the world. He was unshakable, the CEO of Sterling Innovations, a man who ruled boardrooms, conquered industries, and shaped the future of technology. Wealth, fame, power, he had them all. Yet beneath the tailored suits and billion-dollar deals lived a silence he could never escape, an emptiness that grew louder in moments like this, when the world quieted and work could no longer shield him. That was why he hated idle hours. They reminded him of what was missing. Tonight, though, something or someone would change everything. He hadn't meant to wander down to the beach. His plan was to stay in his hotel suite, closing a few more deals before the morning conference. But the sound of the waves had drawn him out, away from polished marble floors and into the living pulse of the night. His loafers sank softly into the sand as he walked, hands buried in his pockets, his mind lost until he saw her. And in that instant, the world stopped. A woman sat not far ahead, her figure framed by the fading sunlight. Her soft brown hair lifted with the breeze, her simple white dress flowing like part of the sea itself. She was breathtaking, serene, like a portrait painted in gold. But to Miles, she was more than beauty. She was memory. Camila Carter, the only woman he had ever loved, the one he had let slip away. Miles froze, his chest tightened painfully, his pulse a drum in his ears. And then his eyes shifted, catching the sight of two small figures playing in the sand before her. A boy and a girl, chestnut hair gleaming in the sun, laughter carried by the waves. The boy turned just for a moment, and Miles felt the blood drain from his body. That face, that jawline, the unmistakable shadow of his own childhood reflection. His heart pounded violently, his breath fractured. He stood rooted to the sand, staring at the impossible truth unfolding before him. Before him stood the impossible. Two children, laughing, running, their hair catching the last glow of sunset. Miles's breath caught in his throat. His mind spun, wildly, trying to calculate the years. 8 years since the divorce. 8 years since Camila had walked away. No, it couldn't be. If she had given birth after their separation, they couldn't possibly be this old. And yet, the boy's face mirrored his own childhood photographs so perfectly, it was undeniable in that single, shattering moment. Miles Sterling realized the truth. He had 2 children, his children, and he had never known they existed. Welcome to today's story. Wherever you're watching from, we send you wishes of health, happiness, and peace. May this story bring warmth to your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stories and become part of our growing family. Once upon a time, Miles Sterling and Camila Carter had been inseparable, the perfect couple. They met when they were young, both chasing dreams bigger than themselves. Camila was an artist, her hands always covered in clay or paint, her heart alive with beauty. Miles was a determined entrepreneur, building his company brick by brick. Their love was pure then, untouched by money or ambition. When they married, Miles owned little more than a small startup, but Camila didn't care. The early years of their marriage were the happiest days of her life. Simple dinners, long walks, whispered promises in the quiet of the night. She had believed with all her heart, that no matter what the future brought, riches or ruin, triumph or trial, Miles would always be the man who placed family first. But success changes people, and Sterling Innovations didn't just succeed, exploded, transforming from a fragile startup into a billion-dollar empire. With it came endless travel, late-night meetings, and a husband who was no longer home. The romantic dates stopped. The shared meals grew rare. Camila told herself to be patient, to hold on. She loved him. She believed it was just a phase. She was wrong. On their 4th wedding anniversary, Camila spent the entire day preparing. She cooked his favorite dishes, slipped into her most elegant dress, and set the table with care. She waited, smiling, certain he would walk through the door. But Miles never came home. No message, no call. Midnight approached, and unease gnawed at her chest. Finally, she picked up her keys and drove to Sterling Innovations. The building was deserted. Only a security guard lingered, shifting uncomfortably as she approached. "Mr. Sterling isn't here," he said quietly. Then, after a pause that seemed to slice through her heart, he added, "But I did see him leave earlier with Ms. Rachel." Camila's breath stopped. Rachel, a high-ranking executive, a woman whose admiring glances at Miles had never gone unnoticed. A woman Miles had once sworn was nothing more than a colleague, and now, on the night that was supposed to celebrate their love, he was with her. There had been nothing between them, Miles once insisted. Just business, but on their anniversary, he wasn't home. He was with her. Camila didn't need anyone to explain further. Her instincts told her the truth, something far worse than a missed dinner. Driven by dread, she made her way to the hotel, where Sterling Innovations often hosted its events, and there, through the gleaming glass doors of the lobby, she saw it, Miles and Rachel, stepping out of the elevator together, too close, too comfortable. Rachel's lips were still curved in a satisfied smile, tinted red, swollen as if she had just been kissed. Miles looked tired, but not guilty. His eyes carried no shame. He didn't even notice the woman standing just a few steps away. His wife, in that moment. Camila's world ended. It was as if her heart was crushed into pieces, so sharp they cut through her chest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't even cry. There was only a vast, echoing hollowness where love had once lived. She turned away, and that was the last time she ever saw Miles as her husband. That same night, she packed her bags and walked out of their home. No messages, no goodbyes, just silence. A silence more final than any argument could ever be. In the days that followed, Miles tried to find her. He called dozens of times, sent hundreds of messages, knocked on doors, reached out to friends, even to her family, but no one knew. Camila had cut every tie, disappearing into the night like a ghost who refused to be haunted. She never regretted leaving, but weeks later, fate dealt her a crueler blow, a truth more devastating than betrayal. She was pregnant. Camila's hands trembled as she held the test, her mind racing. For a fleeting moment, she considered telling Miles that his legacy would live in the child she carried. But then the memory came back, the hotel, the elevator, the other woman's swollen smile. How could she ever trust that he would be a good father when he hadn't even been a faithful husband? No, she made her choice, to raise her children alone, without Miles Sterling, without his name, without his wealth. For 8 long years, Camila Carter lived as a single mother, fierce, determined, protecting her children from the shadow of the man who had broken her, and now, standing on that sun-kissed beach, staring into the eyes of the father they had never known, Camilla felt the sting of that old wound reopen. But she was not the same woman anymore. She was no longer the naive wife who had believed in forever. She was a mother, strong, unshaken and determined, a woman who had fought for her son and daughter. Tom and Lisa had built a good life without the support of Miles Sterling. And yet, here he was. Miles looked as though he had been punched in the chest. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his lips parting, but no words came out at first. Then, swallowing hard, he glanced at the two children before turning back to Camilla. "They're mine." A flicker of pain crossed Camilla's face, but she quickly masked it with a cold, composed expression. "It's too late, Miles," she replied, her voice flat, steady. He shook his head, stepping forward slightly, as if he wanted to reach for her but didn't dare. "You never told me." "If I had known," Camilla let out a bitter laugh, a sound filled with 8 years of unspoken resentment. "If you had known, what then? Would you have left her and come back to me? Would you have accepted our children while still keeping your affair alive?" Her words struck like knives. Miles flinched. Because she was right. You were never the kind of man who could be a husband and a father at the same time. Camilla turned away, her gaze guarded. "You don't have to play the role of a remorseful father, Miles. They don't need you." Those words hit harder than any business rival ever could. "They don't need you." The sentence echoed in his mind like a curse, and yet, as Miles looked at the two children, something inside him refused to break. No matter how much Camilla hated him, no matter how much she tried to push him away, he knew he could not lose them. Not again. For the first time in his life, Miles Sterling felt powerless. He could command a multi-billion-dollar corporation, sign contracts worth hundreds of millions, control empires with a single word. But standing before Camilla and the children he had never known, he was just a man drowning in regret. "Camilla, please." His voice came out hoarse, trembling. "I never knew about them. If I had died, swear I would never have let them grow up without a father." Camilla's arms folded tightly across her chest, her eyes colder than the night sea. "If you truly cared about family, Miles, you wouldn't have betrayed me." Her words sliced through him, deep and merciless. He had made a mistake, one that could never be erased. But was there still a chance to make things right? He swallowed. The ache in his chest took one step closer. "I just want to talk to them, Camilla, that's all. I don't expect you to forgive me." "But the children," his voice cracked. "They have the right to know who their father is." Camilla shook her head slowly, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "You think?" Tom tilted his head, suspicion flickering in his sharp young eyes. "If he's just an old friend, Mummy, why does he look at us like that?" The question pierced the air, simple and innocent, but heavy enough to make Camilla's breath hitch. Lisa tugged at her mother's sleeve, her voice small but curious. "Mummy, do we know him? He feels familiar." Miles's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to say it. "I'm your father." But he caught Camilla's warning glance, her body stiff as if shielding them. He clenched his fists at his sides, forcing himself to stay calm. Camilla knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from Lisa's forehead. "No, sweetheart. You don't know him. He's someone from a long time ago." Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with conflict. Miles took a step forward despite the ache in his chest. His voice trembled. but he made sure it carried warmth instead of desperation. "Hi, Tom, Lisa." He forced a smile. "I know this must feel strange. I don't expect you to understand right now, but I'd like to get to know you, if you'll let me." Tom narrowed his eyes, studying him. There was a spark of defiance, the same stubbornness Miles remembered seeing in the mirror as a boy. "Why now?" Tom asked bluntly. "Where were you before?" The words cut deep. Camilla's eyes darted to Miles, silently daring him to answer. "This is the moment. Prove yourself." Miles swallowed hard, his heart hammering. "I wasn't there," he admitted, his voice rough, raw. "And that's the biggest mistake of my life. I can't change the past, Tom. I can only promise I'll never walk away again. Not from you, not from Lisa." Lisa blinked, her small hand gripping Camilla's tightly. "Mummy, can he stay with us for a little while?" She whispered, "Camila." Froze, her heart twisted violently. Tom's guarded eyes, Lisa's fragile hope, Miles's quiet desperation, all colliding in that one request. She closed her eyes briefly, then stood, her voice low and steady. "We'll see," she said finally. Miles exhaled shakily. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. It was a door barely cracked open, and for Miles Sterling, that was enough to begin. The next morning, the resort's playground buzzed with the cheerful laughter of children. Bright swings creaked under the weight of giggling little ones, and the slide gleamed in the golden sunlight. Tom sat stiffly on the edge of the sandbox, his arms crossed, while Lisa crouched beside him, carefully patting down the walls of her small sandcastle. Camilla sat nearby on a bench, her gaze never leaving them. And then Miles appeared. He looked almost out of place in his tailored shirt and polished shoes, but in his hands he held something simple, 2 ice creams from the beach cafe. His heart pounded as he approached, unsure if they would even accept them. "I wasn't sure what flavors you liked," he said softly, kneeling down and holding them out. "So, I guessed chocolate and strawberry." Lisa's eyes lit up, though she quickly glanced at her mother for permission. Camilla hesitated, her lips pressed tight, but then gave the faintest nod. Lisa beamed, taking the strawberry cone carefully. Tom, however, didn't move. He glared at Miles, suspicion hardening his young features. "You think ice cream is going to fix 8 years?" he muttered. Miles swallowed, his throat burning. He shook his head slowly. "No, Tom, ice cream can't fix that. Nothing can, but maybe." He paused, forcing his voice steady. "Maybe it can be a start." Tom studied him, his grip tightening around the toy car in his hand. For a long moment, the boy said nothing. Then, with a huff, he snatched the cone and took a small bite, his eyes never leaving Miles. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. Lisa tugged gently at Miles's sleeve, her voice curious. "Do you know how to build sandcastles?" Miles blinked, a lump rising in his throat. "Not really," he admitted with a small smile. "But if you show me, I'll try." For the first time, Tom's lips twitched as if fighting back a reluctant smile. Camilla watched from the bench, her heart twisting. She didn't want to soften, not after all the pain. But as she watched her children slowly, cautiously lean toward Miles, she realized something terrifying. Despite everything, they wanted him. Where Tom and Lisa played under the golden Riviera azul sun, Camilla sat on a nearby bench with a book in her lap, though her eyes never left her children. Her grip on the pages was tight, as though holding the story together could somehow keep her own life from unraveling. Miles took a steadying breath. His palms damped despite the sea breeze, and stepped toward them. "Good morning, kids," he said, his voice gentle, almost tentative. Tom turned sharply, his young face already guarded, eyes narrowed with the weight of questions far beyond his age. Lisa, in contrast, blinked at him with hesitant curiosity, still trying to make sense of the word father. "Would you?" she started, her voice barely a whisper before it grew bolder. "I mean, Dad, would you like to go boating with us?" Head snapped up, her brows knitting, lips parting to protest, but before she could, Tom crossed his arms and gave a short nod. "All right," he said, his tone edged with challenge. "Let's see if you're any better at it than me." Miles chuckled, though his chest thudded with emotions he could barely contain. Fair competition, then. Out on the water, the late morning sun shimmered across the waves. Lisa leaned forward eagerly, gripping the oar as Miles gently guided her hands, his voice steady with patience. Tom, sharp-eyed and calculating, maneuvered his small boat with determination. He remained silent, yet Miles caught the flicker of exhilaration in the boy's eyes, fleeting but real. By afternoon, the children begged to join a kid surfing class. Lisa threw herself into it with fearless laughter, while Tom lingered at the edge, arms crossed, scanning every detail before committing. Miles stepped beside him, lowering his voice. "You like to watch first, to study, to know exactly how it works before you jump in, don't you?" Tom turned to him, startled by the accuracy. "How did you know?" Miles smiled faintly, his voice thick with memory. "Because I was exactly like that when I was your age." For the first time, Tom's guarded expression cracked a spark of recognition, almost reluctant connection. That evening, as the sun sank and painted the porch in dusky rose, Lisa sat cross-legged with her sketchbook. Miles approached quietly. "What are you drawing, princess?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She frowned at the page. "Our family, but I don't know how to draw you yet." Miles's throat tightened, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He sat down beside her, picking up a colored pencil with unsteady fingers. "Maybe," he said softly, "you can draw me on a boat with you. Like today." Lisa studied him carefully, then gave a decisive little nod. "Okay, but you have to sit very still." Miles laughed quietly. "Understood, my little artist." From a distance, Camila watched, her chest tightening. Her children were smiling, their laughter rising like music, sounds she had fought to protect them with all these years. And now here was Miles, slipping into their lives as if he had always belonged. Her heart swirled with doubt and fear. He was Miles Sterling, a man who lived in skyscrapers, who negotiated billion-dollar deals, who had once walked away without looking back. Could he truly stay this time, or would he vanish again, leaving Tom and Lisa with wounds deeper than her own? She clenched the book in her hands, her decision like a storm inside her. She wouldn't let him shatter their fragile world, not again that night. As Miles stood on the balcony, the waves breaking softly against the shore, Camila's footsteps approached behind him. "How long do you plan to stay?" she asked. Her voice cool, distant. Miles turned, his gaze steady, unwavering. "As long as I can." Camila frowned, crossing her arms. "You can't stay here forever, Miles. You have a company, a life of your own." He was quiet for a long moment, the sound of the tide filling the silence between them. "My life," he said softly, "hasn't been whole since you left." Her heart wavered, just for a fraction of a second. but she quickly steeled herself. You think a few days can make up for 8 years. Miles didn't flinch. No, he admitted, his voice low but firm. But I have to start somewhere, and I'm not stopping now. Camila bit her lip, her emotions warring with reason. She wanted to believe him God. She wanted to, but the scars of betrayal were not so easily erased. In the days that followed, Miles continued spending time with Tom and Lisa, and the more he saw of them, the more pieces of himself and of Camila he recognized. One afternoon, Miles found Tom sitting cross-legged on a deck chair, completely absorbed in his tablet. Lines of text scrolled across the screen. "Do you like technology?" Miles asked, settling beside him. Tom's eyes lit up. "Of course, I want to build smart robots, like Iron Man." Miles chuckled, both proud and pained. "Have you tried programming yet?" Tom shook his head. "No, I don't have anyone to teach me." A sharp ache pierced Miles's chest. If he had been there all along, Tom would already have had every resource he needed. But he hadn't. He'd missed everything. "How about I teach you?" Miles offered gently. Tom hesitated, then gave a small, almost reluctant nod. "All right. But you have to be better than me." A grin tugged at Miles's lips. "I think I can manage that." So, father and son sat together in the warm glow of the Riviera sun, writing their first lines of code, bridging years of absence with keystrokes and laughter. Lisa, meanwhile, reminded him of Camila in ways that almost undid him. Sensitive, artistic, full of emotion. One morning, he found her in the garden, a large canvas propped before her small hands smudged with bright colors. "What are you painting?" he asked, crouching beside her. Lisa tilted her head, her brush hovering. "A family, but," she frowned, "I don't know how to draw you." Miles swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Would you like me to pose for you?" She studied him with serious eyes, then gave a little nod. "But you have to stay still. No moving." Miles raised his chin in mock seriousness. "Understood, my little artist." As Lisa bent over her canvas, the tip of her tongue peeking out in concentration, Miles watched her with a gaze so tender it almost broke him. She was Camila's mirror, her same thoughtful focus, her same quiet beauty, and Tom, curious and sharp, was his own reflection in that moment. Miles realized something profound. He had lost 8 years, but the children were still his threads of himself and Camila, woven into living proof of what they once shared, and he knew with absolute certainty he could not let them slip away. Again, Miles sat on the edge of his hotel bed, the glow of his phone screen casting harsh light across his face. Dozens of messages, hundreds of missed calls. The headlines screamed at him, each one louder than the last dot. Billionaire Miles, Sterling's secret family, heirs to Sterling Innovations. Finally revealed 8 years of lies. But it was the photo, the one of Lisa's arms wrapped tightly around his neck, Tom staring at him with guarded curiosity that cut the deepest. It was proof of what he had missed, proof of what he could never let slip away again. Yet, in that same moment, fear churned in his gut. The media storm wasn't just about him. The vultures would come for his children, who had only just learned who he was. The following morning, the board's confrontation came like a hammer. "Miles, this is becoming a serious problem," Richard Caldwell, one of the largest shareholders, said, his voice grave over the speakerphone. "Do you know how much our stock has dropped overnight? Investors are in a panic." "I understand," Miles replied, his tone controlled, though his knuckles whitened around the phone. "This is not just about you," another board member snapped. "You are the face of Sterling Innovations. If the media continues to drag your private life through the mud, our reputation will suffer." The board has already discussed possible actions. Miles's jaw tightened. "Actions? If you don't resolve this," Caldwell said coldly, "we may have no choice but to force you to step down as CEO." For a moment, Miles's world went still. He had poured everything into Sterling Innovations, built it from nothing. It was his empire, his identity, and now, in the span of a single headline, they were ready to strip it all away. But even as the threat loomed, his thoughts were not of the company. They were of Tom and Lisa, their wide, uncertain eyes, their innocence. If the media continued to dig, they would suffer, not him, them. And for the first time in his life, Miles Sterling knew there was only one choice to make. He was no longer the man who once betrayed her. Miles stood there, chest heaving, as Rachel's mocking words lingered in the air. He wanted to lash out, to silence her venom with the fury that burned inside him, but he knew anger would only give her satisfaction. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the cafe. His mind consumed with one thought: Camila had seen him with Rachel, outside. The night air was cool, but it did nothing to soothe the fire in his veins. Camila's expression haunted him. The ice in her eyes, the pain she tried to mask, the finality in her voice. She thought he was back to his old ways. She thought every step he had taken toward redemption had been nothing more than a facade. He couldn't let her believe that. Not again. Meanwhile, Camila walked quickly down the street, her heart hammering in her chest. She hated herself for the tears stinging her eyes. She had promised she would never cry over Miles again, never let him have that power. But the image of him sitting across from Rachel, the same woman who had shattered their marriage, was burned into her mind like a cruel brand. How could she have been so foolish? How could she have allowed herself to believe he had changed? "Never again," she whispered under her breath, gripping her bag tighter. Never again. Yet, when she returned to the resort, Tom and Lisa came running to her, their innocent voices cutting through her anger. "Mummy, Daddy taught us how to play chess today." Lisa beamed, her little eyes shining with pride. "He said I'm really smart." Tom nodded reluctantly, but couldn't hide the small smile tugging at his lips. "He's not bad, Mom. He actually knows what he's doing." Camila's heart ached. The children were beginning to trust him, to rely on him. And now she would have to break their hearts to protect them from disappointment. At that very moment, Miles stood outside her door, his knuckles hovering inches from the wood. He wanted to knock, to explain, to beg, but the weight of her cold words still pressed heavily against his chest. Instead, he whispered into the silence, more to himself than anyone else, "I will prove to you, Camila. No matter how many storms come our way, I'll prove I'm not the man I once was. Success. My children didn't ask for this life, but they deserve their father. If I can't be there for them, then what is the point of everything I've built?" The boardroom was tense, the air heavy with disapproval. Richard Caldwell slammed his fist on the table. "Do you realize how much is at stake? Our stockholders are panicking. Investors are questioning your stability. A CEO distracted by family drama is a liability, Miles. If you continue down this path, we may have no choice but to remove you." For the first time in years, Miles didn't flinch under the threat. His voice was calm, but steel laced every word. Then remove me. If this company can't survive without me sacrificing my children, then perhaps it doesn't deserve me at all. I'd rather be remembered as a father who tried than as a CEO who let greed destroy his family. The room erupted in whispers, some board members exchanging uneasy glances. Miles had challenged them directly, a move that could either shatter his empire or reshape it entirely. Camila's reaction, meanwhile, in her hotel room. Camila sat on the edge of the bed, the television flickering before her. She hadn't meant to watch, but when the broadcast of Miles's press conference appeared, she couldn't look away. Her hands trembled as she clutched the remote, her heart pounding as his words echoed through the speakers. I betrayed the woman I loved most. I will never let my family suffer because of my failures again. For a moment, the walls she had built around her heart wavered. She remembered the man she once fell in love with, the dreamer who had nothing but ambition. The husband who used to look at her as if she were his whole world. But then the memories of betrayal returned, sharp and unforgiving. Tears burned in her eyes as she whispered to herself, "Words are easy, Miles, but will your actions match them this time?" The porch, and listening to their stories with the kind of attentiveness Camila had once longed for, Tom, who had always been skeptical, began to soften. One evening, after a long session of building a robot kit together, he muttered under his breath, "You're not so bad, Dad." The word hit Miles like a tidal wave. For a moment, he couldn't even speak, his throat tightening as he fought back tears. He simply ruffled Tom's hair, whispering, "That's the best thing I've ever been called." Lisa, too, began to grow attached. She would often climb onto Miles's lap with her sketchbook, demanding he sit still while she drew him. Her childish portraits were messy and colorful, but Miles cherished each one as if they were priceless works of art. Camila's inner struggle, Camila, however, remained cautious. She watched from the sidelines, her heart aching as she saw her children slowly open their hearts to the man she had once loved. Every smile, every laugh they shared with Miles made her walls crack a little more, but the memory of betrayal still haunted her. Late at night, as she tucked Tom and Lisa into bed, she asked herself the same question over and over. Can I really trust him this time? Miles's new life, Miles, now free from the relentless grind of Sterling Innovations, seemed almost like a different man. He traded tailored suits for casual shirts, boardroom negotiations for afternoons at the beach. He was no longer the billionaire CEO, he was simply a father. One afternoon, while Lisa painted seashells and Tom tested his new drone, Miles turned to Camila. "I know I can't erase the past," he said softly, "but I want to build a new future with you, with them. Not as Miles Sterling the CEO, but as Miles Sterling, the man who finally understands what matters." Camila looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, almost reluctantly, she admitted, "You're not the same man I left 8 years ago." For the first time, Miles saw not anger in her eyes, but a flicker of hope. The world seemed to pause. The steady rhythm of the waves, the golden glow of the horizon, even the cries of seagulls overhead, all of it faded, leaving only the two of them standing there. Camila's breath caught in her throat. For years she had built walls around her heart, walls forged from betrayal, heartbreak, and loneliness. But as Miles's warm hand closed around hers, those walls began to tremble. "I don't expect you to forget," Miles whispered, his thumb brushing lightly over her fingers. "I just want the chance to show you every single day that I can be the man you once believed in. Not through promises, but through actions, through love." through being here. Camila lifted her gaze to him. In his eyes, she no longer saw the ruthless, ambitious CEO who had shattered her trust. She saw a man stripped bare of pride and a father who adored his children, a man desperate not to lose the woman he still loved. Her heart ached with the weight of conflicting emotions. Could she forgive him? Did she even dare? But then, from the villa behind them, a small voice called out, "Mummy, Daddy. Come, see the stars." Tom and Lisa were waving from the balcony, their faces glowing with innocent joy. Camila felt her resolve waver. Slowly, she tightened her grip on Miles's hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Miles's chest tightened as hope surged through him. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting for redemption. He was walking toward it, step by step, side by side with Camila and their children. And under the twilight sky of Riviera Azul, a broken family began to stitch itself back together, not with perfection, but with something stronger: trust, love, and the courage to try again. Without words, both understood this was not an ending, but a new beginning. No rushed promises, no illusions of perfection, just a slow, steady path toward forgiveness, a fragile trust being rebuilt, piece by piece. This was Miles's journey of redemption. After making the greatest mistake of his life, he not only reclaimed the right to be a father, but also discovered how to be a better man, one who finally placed his family above all else. Camila, though still carrying scars from the past, chose to give him a chance to prove he had truly changed. And Tom and Lisa, innocent hearts who longed for love, finally received what they had always deserved: a complete family. Because forgiveness does not mean erasing the past. It means choosing to move forward together. Thank you for being with us through this story. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional and powerful tales. Until next time, remember, love always wins.